So thank you all for coming to hear Ray talk tonight. He's been working with dogs for over 50 years and been one of the major dog behaviorists, innovators of the field. And he's talking about his second book, A Ray of Hope, which has just come out. And his stories are fascinating. I really enjoyed them. So thank you again for coming, and I hope you all enjoyed the evening.
Thank you, Melanie. Luke, can you hear me? Okay. Where do I start? I'm not good with a podium. Never have been. I like sitting or standing and not talking at a group, but talking with you. And what I would like you to think is that I'm basically sitting in your kitchen across the table from you with some coffee, and we're just talking dogs. And so let's say let's say you've got a dog that's aggressive. And so this, what I'm about to tell you would apply to almost any dog with any problem, all right? So anyway, you've got this aggressive dog, and I say, so how long have you had? Well, we've had him 3 years, and for the first 2 years he was great. Now all of a sudden he's turned into Mr. Hyde, and he's bitten 3 people, and so we're not sure we can keep him. And I said, have you done any work with him? Well, we had 3 trainers, and he bit the first trainer, so the first trainer never came back again. And the other 2 mostly tried working with food, and I said, how'd that work out? Well, I mean, you're here. So I said, okay, fundamentally, what's aggression about? And you say, well, the second and third trainers said to me, I know exactly why your dog's aggressive, because he's fearful. And I say, okay, fear is a form of aggression, but it's not the fundamental reason. There's fear, there's dominance, there's protection, there's territoriality, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on and on and on. The main reason for aggression is control. So that hits a lot of people right here, boom. Why? Because they've never thought of it that way. See, if the trainer says the dog is fearful, he's territorial, then what happens is that immediately takes any of the responsibility away from the owner. So the owner can say, well, it's not me, it's Jojo over there. But that's not true. Say it's about control. Now, the human can relate on, let's say, 2 levels. He can relate on what I would call the horizontal level. A girlfriend, your golfing partner, fishing buddy, kind of a close and equal relationship. See, God never put that chip in the brain of the dog. A dog has 0 understanding of equality. Why? Because he's a dog, and the chip isn't there. Now, the other form of relation is vertical, boss, staff, professor, student. That's what the dog understands. If we as dog owners don't take our primary responsibility of achieving a leader-follower role, then what happens? we force the dog into taking that role. Why? Because he can't understand equality. He can't. You can try for 15 years to establish a pure buddy relationship with your dog, and you will fail. You cannot do it. When I speak in terms of leader-follower, I'm not talking about you being alpha or being dominant. That's old cowboy stuff. I mean, that's what I used to do many, many years ago when I first started, because I learned from old retriever field trial pros, and they could get pretty rough with the dogs. When I started doing what I'm doing now, one thing I did know was you can't get rough with a client's dog. Why? Because they're not going to want you to come back. So I had to learn a better way. I looked all over the place. I read books. I read every book in Angell Memorial's library on dog behavior. I talked to a lot of trainers that I knew. They were basically doing the same thing that I was doing. So I say in my book, like a wandering monk, I went from here to there, trying to get it. Eventually, I went to the dogs, literally. I said, okay, you teach me. You be the teacher, I'll be the student. And it was hard, I mean really hard, particularly working with aggressive dogs. And I could roll up my sleeves and show you. I got a lot of lessons from those animals. I have a lot of scar tissue. Okay. Now, there are two virtues that I have to get from a dog when I start working with it. One is trust, and one is respect. Which one do I need to get first?
Trust.
How many say trust? Anybody say respect? A few, all right? All right, so remember, I'm sitting at the kitchen table with you. I say, with Rex over there, who's aggressive, how do I get his trust? Well, with food, all right, there's a very good chance if I go to give him food, I'm going to get bitten. Well, yes, yeah, he's done that. So I said, well, you have to spend time with him. Yeah, but see, I don't have the luxury of going over to someone's house for a month, for 3 or 4 days a week, sitting at your kitchen table drinking coffee, waiting for Killer over there to decide, I think this guy's okay. I think I'll trust him. So the truth is, I don't place a large emphasis on trust in the beginning. So where do I start? I start with healing. You know what healing is? Dog walks next to you with the slack lead. Okay? Now, let's talk about that for a bit because it's important. He'll sit, down, stay, come. What do we call those? Commands. All right, almost everybody calls them that. Now, let's say that I'm going to have dinner with my daughter Kristen up in Concord tomorrow. And her twins aren't 19. Let's say they're between 3 and 4. So I get up there, we finish dinner. Kristen says to the kids, okay, kids, come on, it's 7 o'clock, so go in and brush your teeth. I hear them brushing their teeth. I'm not going to say to Kristen, hey, Chris, what a great job you've done teaching the command, brush your teeth, to the twins. So it's not a command, right? What is it?
Routine?
It becomes a routine, yes. But in the beginning, a tip. It's a task, right? Now, the twins complete the task, they get rewarded, they feel better about themselves, as shrinks tell us, they feel safer, more secure, under what? Under Kristen and Van's parenting. Let's transfer that over to the dog. When you ask your dog to sit, I'd like you to think of it as you're not giving your dog a command, you're giving your dog a task. When the dog completes the task, he gets rewarded. He succeeds. He feels better about himself, feels safer, more secure, under what? Under your coaching, guidance, leadership, chairman of the board. However you want to view that, of all the basic tasks, the most critical for me is healing. I was in England 10 years ago, last week in May, first week in June, working with 2 former street dogs from Antigua. John and Kim have a home down there. Kim went to the holding facility there, and she saw these 2 5-month-old street dogs, litter mates, males, and she tells John, we have to save these dogs. So John says, fine. They bring them back to England. They're fine for 2 months, and then they started having small dust-ups. And John, being a former British SAS, would just break up the fights, but the fights got worse, eventually becoming bloodletting, overnight trips at the vet. So when they were 9 months, between that time and 9 months, they separated the dogs all the time. One dog had one room, the other dog had another room. John had an enormous pen built for the dogs, and in the morning he'd put George in the pen to run around, and then they'd let Zook run loose because they have 13 acres there. And then next time the dogs went out, then they'd switch. So both dogs got plenty of exercise. When they were 9 months, they had a renowned behaviorist come down from London to work with the dogs. He started working with them. She did. The dog got away from her, attacked the other dog. They had the worst fight they ever had. George wound up with 24 stitches in his neck. They almost lost him, and John wound up in the hospital. So she tells them, you'll never get these dogs together. You have to get rid of one of them. Well, that's hard. So Kim was having lunch with this Barbara Tarlow, who was a client of mine in Dorset many years ago, back in 1990. And so she said, before you make a decision, why don't you get in touch with our guy in the States? So make a long story short, I went over there, was there for 9 days. I started the first day on healing. And that's what I did. Eventually, he got second dog. Eventually, I got him where I could walk one on one side, the other on the other side. Eventually, both dogs together. And eventually, let them loose. They were fine. 10 years ago, they've never fought with each other since. What did I work on? Healing. I never worked on the aggression directly. John at one point, one morning, said to me, Ray, I see you're doing brilliantly with the dogs walking next to you, but when are you going to start on the aggression? And I said, oh, I know what you mean, John. when are we going to let both dogs loose in the kitchen? And when they get into it, you grab one, I grab the other, and we beat the tar out of both dogs, and they say at the end, I don't think I ever want to get in another fight. And John looks at me with a big grin, and he says, exactly. I said, it doesn't work that way, John. What was I working on with healing? Establishing a leader role. When that leader role is accomplished, you take the responsibility away from the dogs. It is no longer their responsibility to fight over which one of them is leader. Why? Because neither one of them are. They're both followers. John was a leader. I was a leader first, then John, then Kim, then John, then Kim's secretary, and then Becky the dog walker. So it worked all the way down. No more fights. I've done it with a lot of dogs. Healing. Now, there's a couple things about healing. I start with a British slip lead. So, yeah, it's made of soft material. And it slips. Now, dogs and horses are both what would be called into pressure animals. What does that mean? It means simply this. Hold that end of the lead if you would. Now hold it tight, but you're a big guy and I'm an old bugger, so not too tight, all right? So if I start to pull, sustained pull, the harder I pull in this direction, the harder he's going to pull in the opposite direction. Why? Because a simple little, thank you, a simple little thing called the opposition reflex is triggered. It's not an intellectual concept with the dog, it's reflexive. When he feels sustained pressure in one direction, he's going to pull in the opposite. And that's why you see people walking down the street like this, with a dog dragging on the end, you know. And like if you talk to the owner, he might say something like, well, yeah, you know, I've been working with Tara here for 2 years, trying to get him to walk next to me. Wouldn't you think he'd be smart enough to back off the pressure? It's not a question of course he's smart enough, but it's reflexive. So he pulls into it. You never want to have sustained pressure on the lead when you're working on healing. Now, what's your first name? Matt. Matt? If Matt stands up and walks close to me and takes 2 fingers and snaps me in the front of my neck, this is a lousy example, but it's the only one I can think of. If he snaps me here, do I move my head forward or backward? Backwards. Why? Because a reflex called the avoidance reflex is excited. So, if you take the lead, hold it tighter, and hold it tight. And now he goes out in front. If I'm going to take a step to the right, if I'm walking him on the left side, and as I make my turn, I'm going to snap this way, very quick, boom. That's the equivalent of this on the dog. Now the dog gets the avoidance reflex excited, moves his head back and turns. What does he see? He sees that I am now walking away from him and I'm encouraging him to catch up. Now he does it again. I do the same thing. There was an old horseman named Ray Hunt. Ray died, I think 2006, 2008, was what the media would call a horse whisperer, guy that learned to be a horse gentler, and he could do miracles, as people said, with horses. One of the things that Ray used to tell his students was this: when you're working your horse, make the wrong thing difficult and the right thing easy. Think about that, okay? Because if you don't remember a single thing that I said this tonight from all my yakking, remember that line from Ray Hunt: make the wrong thing hard and the right thing easy. See, Ray never said make the wrong thing impossible. He just said make it difficult. If he was on a horse that insisted on going left, he'd let him go left. But he'd make it hard, not painful, just difficult for that horse. Now he does it again and again. Eventually that horse is going to say, I can keep going left, but it ain't working out very well for me, so I think I'm going to go right. That's the beginning of Ray's idea becoming the horse's idea. Does it work with dogs? Of course it does. You know? I worked with a dog a number of years ago up in Lowell. The dog breed was a Komondor. They're a very ancient breed, Eastern flock guarding dogs. They're big. The males can run $120. And the problem was an interesting one. First of all, when I got there, a husband says to me, so, Ray, here's a problem. If we get something new, like that stainless steel kitchen trash can, and I bring it in the house, I can't use it for a couple of days. Why? Well, because Koo will stand right there and show his teeth. Now, after 2 or 3 days, we can use it fine. Same thing with an armoire that came in. I couldn't adjust the shelves for 2 or 3 days because he really gets aggressive. But after that, no problem at all. I move the shelves, adjust them. And then his wife says, but the real problem is this: we cannot use our attached garage. Why? Well, we used to. We'd go through the kitchen door into the garage, and then we get in the car, open up, boom, back it out. And it was February, so it's cold, and it's snowy and sleety. And she said, one of the reasons we bought the house was because the garage was attached, and I don't have to go out when it's snowing and get my hair all messed up. Now we can't go out through the kitchen door because he stands there with his teeth. So he said, now we have to go out the front door, walk around, open the garage door, get in, and she said, I have to tell you, I'm pissed. So I said, all right. I said, I think I'd start with some tasking. And I said, here's what I'd suggest. Why don't we start with having him sit before you give him affection? If he doesn't sit, don't chase him around the house, just avoid giving him affection until he comes back looking for it. Ask him to sit again. If he doesn't, don't worry about it. Eventually, he's a social animal. He's going to sit when you ask him. Why? Because he wants the affection. But rather than just give him affection because he's breathing in and breathing out, give him a task. And she writes that down. Okay, sit before affection. What else? They were both professors at UMass. She said, what else? I said, I think that's probably enough for starters. She said, that's ridiculous. He sits. So she calls him. I hadn't seen him yet. And the beast comes in about 30 seconds later. Huge dog. And he starts to come over to her. She gets out of her chair and she says, sit. You sit. He turns around and walks out. I said, I think sit's enough to start with. I said, do me a favor. Give me a call when he sits. I don't hear from her for a week. I thought, okay, I'm never going to hear from them again. The two of them, as soon as I left, said, we might as well have taken that check and flushed it down the toilet. Second week, nothing. Third week, get a call. I said, oh, my God, Maria, I never thought I was going to hear from you again. She said, well, it took 3 days for him to sit. But now, boom, he sits automatically if he comes over. And we just tell him, good sit, and we give him some affection. I said, well, that's great. And she said, but there's something else. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, here's the other shoe. She said, 3 days ago, my husband got up after breakfast, as usual, with his coffee cup, puts it in the sink, turns towards the garage door, and the dog moves away from it. She said, we've been going out through the garage door ever since. I said, perfect. She said, but we're just wondering, what caused the change? I said, geez, I don't know. Must be a coincidence, all right? What changed it? Structuring, what I call quiet firmness, getting the dog to respond to a simple task. It can change everything. Everything. Now, when you start working with a dog, particularly if you're working on getting him to stop or end an inappropriate behavior, or if you're starting on healing, there's going to be pressure involved in that process. Not physical pressure, but psychological, emotional pressure, okay? And that pressure can come in one of three ways. All the pressure on the person, all the pressure on the dog, or it can be split. Some on the dog, some on the person. Where do you think the pressure should be? How many say on the person? How many say on the dog? How many don't give a damn?
How many are afraid of me?
I'm trying the best I can here. Another tip. What's a synonym for pressure? Stress, right? Think about this. When I work with a dog, I can't afford to have that much stress. Why? Because the dog picks it up that fast. And then what does he say? He says, oh, I'm working with a guy here that doesn't have much confidence, and I'm toast. So I don't want to have any pressure on me. So where does the pressure go? On the dog. But I need to create a dynamic whereby as soon as that dog begins to do what I'd like him to do, the pressure stops. There's no more pressure. And who turned the pressure off? The dog did. Okay? Had a guy with a Rottweiler. He'd tell the dog, sit. Dog would sit. And he said, so the problem, Ray, is he's a great dog, but he won't lie down for me. Said if I give him a down, he'll sit there and he'll give out a low growl. If I tell him again, down, he said, and I'm using the collar now to give him a jerk. Second time, he curls the lip. If I do it again, he'll bite. He rolls up his sleeve, got his forearm all bandaged, all right? I said, Tony, why are you going to war with this dog? He said, well, I had the trainer, and the trainer said to me, you have to show him who's the boss. Now, one of the virtues, wonderful virtues about a dog is they have no ego. Think about it. A dog is egoless. But how about the human? The human's got ego. And it can be your best friend or your worst enemy. All right? It can be a killer because we get frustrated. Why? Because we're not controlling our mind. How many of you are familiar with the Chinese word qi? Okay, a fair amount. Qi or qi is about your inner energy. All creatures have energy, not just humans. I mentioned this to a client not too long ago, and she said, you're talking about my dog? I said, yeah. She said, dogs have energy? I said, surprise. Yep, they do. Your energy affects your dog's energy, and that energy affects your dog's behavior. Okay? Energy can come to the top of the list. There are three things in my humble opinion that are responsible for a dog's behavior. One might be the survival instinct. I see this in a lot of dogs that are former street dogs, you know, the dogs that had to fight for their food. Okay. Second, not in the order of importance, but the second one would be hierarchy. We talked about that a little bit, how important that is. The next one is qi, energy, and that can go right to the top. Why? Because it's about our mind. And if I can do this, with so it begins with the mind. The mind is everything. It is the computer process in the human body. The senses are controlled by the mind. Your eyes see an object, but it's your mind that identifies what that object is. Quote, for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will be his greatest enemy. That's from the Bhagavad Gita. Your energy is controlled by your mind. If you do not learn to control your mind, how in the world can you possibly hope to have any control of your dog's mind? It starts there. Before you pick up the lead, you have to have some idea in your mind. What am I going to work with? What are my expectations from Charlie today? And your expectations should always be positive. Why? Because if they're not positive, they're negative. There is no neutrality in energy. It's a killer if you lose control. People say, well, yeah, I get frustrated. Well, frustration's low-level anger. That's not going to get you anywhere, and it certainly isn't going to help you with your dog. You need to be in control of your mind, and only then can you start to help control of your dog's mind. And that's critical that you do so. And in doing so, you combine mutual trust and respect. Ray Hunt, the horseman I told you about, had a horse that was his, and he was a horse trainer, and he could not ride this horse. This horse, he said, was a biter, a sticker. He said he'd buck, rear, do anything he could to get me off. In desperation, he went to an old Oregon cowboy, Tom Dorrance, who I think was in his 70s at the time. The first time Tom walked into the corral with that horse, Ray said it was unbelievable. He said that horse just physically went. Within 25 minutes, Tom was aboard that horse with his arms crossed and the reins dragging on the ground, riding him around the corral. And he could put him into a jog, put him into a lope, and break him down again. First session, Ray went back to him several times, and he says, eventually, one thing I learned was, in order to gain respect, I had to give respect. And that's so important with our dogs, that we gain that respect, but we give respect also. I learned, as I said earlier tonight, very painfully, a little bit about proper communication with them. They're giving us signals all the time. The Rottweiler that wouldn't lie down for this guy, what did he do first? Little growl. What's the growl about? Don't push me. Okay? Don't push this. But Tony pushed it. Next time what happens? He gives him another message. Okay? You're pushing this. Do not do this. It's not going to end well. Tony pushes it again. Why? Because he's frustrated. Because the trainer says you have to be the boss. So that's what he tries to do. Bang, he winds up going down the emergency room to get stitched up. He didn't pay attention to the dog. We say it's not about the dog. It's about me. Me. I'm in charge. Really? Are you sure? And it happens very simple. I'll tell you, my own, I've had him just 5 months. He's a rescue, mostly yellow lab, probably 20% some kind of hound. Great dog. Had a few issues in the beginning, got him past that. And then, he'd come over and he'd put his head right here, and he'd be standing there and he'd give me this business, So I said, well, okay, maybe I'll give him a couple more toys, all right? So I gave him a couple toys. And now he's getting worse. And he'd come around dinner time, I'm eating, and Judy'd be with me, and he'd be right there, shoving his nose in there, and I'd push him away a little bit. And it finally dawned on me, like 3 o'clock one morning. I said, you know what Coda's doing? He's doing the exact same thing that many of your clients' dogs do. And guess what you're doing? You're doing the same thing that the clients are doing. So, what did I do? I said, I wrote it down here. If I sit before affection, he's down at the threshold to the kitchen where we eat. He's in a downstay there. If he gets up, comes in, send him right back. Send him right back. Send him right back. And I don't get loud and I don't get angry. I just very, very simply just bring him back, have him in a down, and took away all but 2 toys. Guess what? He's back to where he was a month ago. And no direct corrections, just positive discipline, resetting the boundaries and limits. It's so easy to forget. He's the first true rescue dog I've ever had. And I fell into that trap that so many people who get a rescue dog fall into. I'll ask many of them, most of them, I'll say, do you feel sorry for your, oh yeah, I do. Why? Well, he went through some tough stuff, and so, yeah, I feel sorry for him. In my first book, there was one sentence that was italicized in that book, and it's very simple. It's, never feel sorry for your dog. Why? Because it's a trap. And in a way, it's the same trap that I fell into. First rescue dog, and before, I know his background. He was between 6 and 8 months on the streets in Birmingham, Alabama. He learned a lot of bad stuff there. One thing you learn, loves coffee. But he would open up anything they possibly could, any bag, anything, looking for food. So I worked on that. But I also, as I said, I fell into that trap, see, a little bit. That 8 months on the street affected the relationship. You can't change that. If you've got a rescue dog and he was abused before, there isn't a darn thing you can do to change what happened. But the day you pick him up, guess what? You start with a clean slate. And what you put on that slate from that point on is what's important to the dog. When I started with Coda, I picked him up in Maine, 3-hour trip down to Westwood. He howled the whole way, jumped from the back seat to the front seat, to the back seat, to the front seat. Howl. I finally took my implant off my ear and stuck it in my pocket so I wouldn't hear him. We got home at 11. I gave him until 3 in the afternoon. Gave him 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, all right? Hours to just kind of begin to relax a little bit, get used to the place. Took him out, put him on the slip lead, started on healing. Same day. Starting with giving him positive tasks. Okay? If you want affection, complete the task. It was hard for him in the beginning, particularly the sit was really hard because he'd never had that. He knew what it meant, but he wouldn't, it was hard. But he's really good now. And I've never gotten loud with him. I've never gotten angry with him, but I'm firm. And on healing, I will tell you, I am a bear on healing. I don't want him out here. I want him right here, right next to me. If I'm working with a client and they want to walk the dog on the right side, it's okay. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to the dog which side you walk him on. But I want him so that if he's on the right side, if I want to make a right turn, I can make a right turn without looking at the dog and without worrying about falling over him. Healing is healing. It's like coming when called. It's just like recall. The guy says, well, a guy in the North End had a Springer, male Springer, nice dog. And it's an interesting story because it speaks to what I call a sense of presence. He got this dog as a puppy, and I saw Gunner when he was, I think, 2.5. And, you know, when they did the big dig, and they took a lot of that dirt and they made a big park in the north end, so they'll get 20, 25 people with their dogs down there at 6:30 in the morning and let them all run. And he says, so I let Gunner out, so I take the lead off him, and he can run out there with the other dogs. Now here's the thing, Ray, if I have the lead on him, if he's anywhere within a circumference this big, he's perfect if another dog comes running up. Now, usually trainers will tell you that the closer if a dog's aggressive with another dog, he's most aggressive when he's on a lead. This dog, total opposite. He said, when I let him off the lead, if he gets out there 50, 60 feet with the other dogs, he may get into a fight with them. I said, how good's his coming when called? Oh, he said, it's good. I said, what if he gets in a dust-up out there and you call? Oh, no. Once he gets into it, if he starts to growl, if I call him, no, he won't come. I said, But he said, why is he so good here? I said, my guess is this. When he was very young, you started working with him. And you worked with him really diligently. He said, 14 months, Ray, every day, 30 to 40 minutes. He said, you know Hanover Street in the north end? Yep. He said, I can walk him up off the lead, heel. Perfect, right there. But if he's out there, no, I said, all right, here's what you did. By working with him as you did, you established what I call a very strong sense of presence in this area. But when he's out 50, 60, 70 feet, you have not extended that sense of presence out there. He said, how do you know? I said, because he doesn't come when you call him. So he said, how do we solve the problem? I said, we reinforce his coming when called. So he said, how do you do that? He said, I've worked with him. I said, we'll just use the remote caller and we'll reinforce his coming when called. Guess what? Reinforced his coming, no more dog fights. Okay? And we never had to get tough with the dog. See, when the dog is out there and he's in charge, then he feels responsible. It's like the dog that's aggressive at the door when someone comes. He's in charge. Why? Well, the owner's here. The dog is between the owner and the door. So he naturally then starts to understand, I'm in charge here. If there's no structure. And so what does he do? In his mind, he's responsible for dealing with that person coming in. What he needs to learn is that it isn't his responsibility. It's his responsibility. And it's the dog's responsibility to be responsible to him. He's the one that's going to deal with the person coming in. Or if it's a dog-dog aggression thing on the street, you're walking your dog, you're having a nice walk with him. Now, Cujo comes around the corner. What's the first thing if it's me, what's the first thing that I do as a dog owner? I see that dog coming, I tense up. My energy now has gone from positive, nice walk, to negative, and that dog picks it up that fast, and what does he associate it with? He associates it immediately with the approaching dog. And he says, it's my responsibility to deal with that dog the best way I can. I have a client with a dog that's very fearful, and she says, yeah, but Ray, my dog is so fearful, how can that be about control, responsibility? I said, well, think about it. If the dog is fearful of another dog approaching, then he has to think, I have to get control of that dog as quickly as I can. Why? Because maybe my survival's in jeopardy here. And so, what does he do? Boom. Goes after it. Control. Remember I said early on here, 2 days ago when I first started, what's aggression about? Control. But so are a lot of the other stuff. The stuff that Coda started to do with me before I woke up. It's about control. Doesn't have to be aggression. It can be simple stuff. It can be attention demand behavior. Huh? What's that about? That's about control. Almost all this stuff, if you look at it really, it starts with who's in control. And as I said, it's not about being alpha. It's not about being dominant. It's just about being what I call quietly firm. And it should be fun. The process should be fun. One more thing, and then I think we have some time, if I can find this. I hope this book will awaken you to a desire to become a compassionately firm leader, companion to your dog. May it open you to the awareness that success is not only possible, but achievable, creating the relationship between you and your dog, which you've always wanted, yet thought never possible. To get there, you will also need to work on yourself. This book is about working with your dog, but it's also about you working on you. And that can be the really difficult part. But in the end, you will understand this book is really about both dog and owner learning from each other. We have a lot to learn from our dog if we're open to learning, if we're open to it, if we can forget the ego, let the ego drift off. It has no place in working with our dogs. Any questions?
I want you to finish your story now, because I have a neighbor who has a dog, and he sees that other dog coming, and oh my gosh, she literally runs away with her dog. So how do you, I mean, neither dog and neither owner have really been dog trained. So if here's one owner walking her dog, and then here comes the other owner with that dog, really I've seen them, the two dogs lock on, and it's, so how would you handle that situation?
It's dog-dog aggression is now 70% of my practice, at least, maybe higher. What is your friend? What kind of a dog?
A rescue from Puerto Rico. A rescue from Puerto Rico.
How big? Oh,
Well, he's about
30, 35 pounds, 40 pounds?
He's stocky.
All right. What does your neighbor want the dog to do when she walks it? Where does she want it? Does she put it on a flex lead? Let him go all over the place?
No, I don't firm lead.
And she's holding it tight.
Oh, yeah, when that other dog appears, yes.
So
The fear's going right down?
her dog doesn't heal. If her dog healed well, he would walk right past that other dog with a slack lead. Trust me, I do it.
Should be amazed.
It's a challenge, but is it achievable? Sure. See, your friend doesn't have an aggressive dog. She has a dog that doesn't heal.
Okay.
I had a client in Lincoln with a wonderful golden retriever. Your friend should get my book. With a wonderful golden retriever. The owner, great woman, and a master gardener, 170, 180 rose bushes. She's out there all the time pruning. And so they did some basic work with the golden, but she would be out there in the morning and there'd be a lot of rabbits around and they'd chew on the leaves. So from the time this guy was a puppy, she'd tell him, get the rabbit. So he learned to keep the rabbits away, chase that little round white fluff ball on the end. So now he's a year and a half old. She comes, long driveway, very long. She comes down one afternoon to get the mail. She's got the dog with her off the lead, and she doesn't know it, but the next door neighbor that's probably 40 yards away, there's a fair distance, and there's a big open field between the houses. The neighbors were going out for the day, and they had hired the teenage daughter across the street to dog watch for their Maltese, little white dog. Guess what? The dog gets out. She opens the door. Boom, the dog's out and works his way down into the field. Now, my to-be client is walking the golden retriever back and sees that white, bang, goes after it, grabs it, picks it up, shakes it, kills it. Now, the wife calls me, I get there, husband opens the door, "You Ray McSoley?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, I can't remember her name, anyway, we'll call her Alice. He says, "I'm Alice's husband. Listen, before you get started here, you can talk to my wife all you want, but at the end of the day, I'm taking that dog to the vet and I'm having him euthanized." I said, "Why?" "You know what he did? He killed the neighbor's dog. I cannot have a dog killer in my house. I will not have that." I said, "Well, I mean, he's your dog, all right? But from what your wife told me, you don't have a dog killer." He said, "What?" I said, "What you have is you've got a golden retriever that doesn't come when he's called. Your wife called him 4 times. If that dog would have come when he was called, the Maltese would be alive and I wouldn't be here. And you wouldn't be thinking about killing your dog later on this afternoon." And he said, "Are you telling me you can solve the problem?" I said, "I can get your dog to come when called." He said, "For sure?" I said, "Absolutely." That's what we did. So we saved the dog's life. They didn't have a dog killer. Had a dog didn't come when he was called. How important is structuring? It can save the dog's life. That's how important it is. Question?
Do you use treats at all when you
No.
train?
Great question. I do. I didn't mean to answer it that fast.
Oh, I don't. So.
Yes, I do use food as a reinforcement when, let's say, my labs are 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 13. By the time they're 14 weeks, I'm phasing out the food as a reward. I'll tell a client, they have a 2-year-old dog, let's say. I say, using food? Oh, yeah, that's what the trainer, yeah, everything is food. I said, you got a 2-year-old dog. Don't you think it's time for you to be the treat? What is it today about the human psyche that just feels that patting the dog, giving affection directly from us to the dog, isn't sufficient for the dog? That we have to use food. And something else I'll tell you. Let's say that you and I have 5-month-old litter mates, okay? And we're working on down. I'm using food and you're not. Chances are very high that my dog is going to start going down faster than yours, right? But there's a caveat there. And what's the caveat? It's simply this: as long as you're using food as the basis for a reinforcement, you will never achieve a leader role with your dog. Why? Because he's not doing it for you. He's doing it for the food. I've had thousands of clients, thousands, I'll say. How good is your dog on the training? Well, I mean, he's 100% on set if we give him a food treat. I said, what if you don't? Well, it's iffy, Get serious about the work. In the beginning, the food's...
You can start them out with the food.
Huh?
You can start them out with a treat when they're little. You're saying when they're puppies.
Yeah.
And then you phase it out. Is that what
Sure.
you're saying? Yeah.
Sure. And then you just take over, you become the treat. I mean, there's something about I think there's something about a lack of self-confidence in us that says, oh, I'm not good enough for him to just work because he's going to get my hands on him. All right, for affection, or he's going to get, hey, what a good boy that was. It doesn't work that way. He'll work harder for you in the long run without the food. Where did it start? It started, I believe, with the seals in the aquarium. You go for the seal show, right? And they jump through the hoop. And then what happens? Then the trainer throws them a fish. Now, first of all, those shows are timed around the feeding time for the seal. Okay? So, is it okay if the seal's trained for fish? Of course. Why? Well, of course he's going to do it because he gets a fish. But there's no real relationship. The seal doesn't go home with the trainer at night. It's black and white. I don't know where this food stuff really started from, but it's not healthy, and it's coming directly out of the veterinary schools of veterinary medicine today, and it isn't healthy at all. and I'll go toe-to-toe with any vet that says it is. Because they're not in the trenches, and I am. I had a client say to me, he's a nice guy, PhD, said, so where exactly did you get your training, Ray? I said, well, pretty much hands-on. He said, you didn't go to school for it? I said, well, probably not the school that you're thinking of. He said, so you really then have really no experience? I said, at that point, I said, I've got about 36 years of experience. I'm in the trenches with these dogs. No, I didn't learn it from a book. Oh boy, I shouldn't have said that. Forget what I just said. When my first book in '88, Dog Tales, came out, and the fellow who was a guide for me, a guy by the name of Larry Rothstein, had his doctorate in journalism, and he was a ghostwriter, and I wound up writing it, but Larry and I would maybe twice a month go to a bar restaurant in Jamaica Plain called Doyle's, and we'd go over the chapters that I wrote, and he would give me pointers, all right? Change this, change that. When the book was published, he and I went to Doyle's just to grab a pizza and a couple of beers and celebrate. So at one point I said to him, so Larry, do you think Dog Tales is a great book? And he looks at me and he sits back in the booth and he says, a great book. The Iliad is a great book. War and Peace is a great book. Dog Tales? It's a good book. I honestly think if Larry was sitting right there and he read this, he would say, Ray, A Ray of Hope is a very, very, very good book. But it ain't War and Peace. There's my heart, as well as my experiences, is in that book. There's no filter. I wrote it not to try and make it sound good. And there's no preaching in it. I said in the very beginning, I want it to sound like I am sitting across from you at the kitchen table, and we're just talking about your dogs, all right? And dogs in general. And so that's how I wanted to make it sound, you know? So I think that you'll really enjoy it. There's a lot of 50 years of experience working with the dogs in it. And yeah, it's a very good book. Any other questions? Yes?
So I know it's natural for dogs to mark. But what if your dog is an excessive marker?
Well, all right. What kind of a dog?
I have a rescue dog from a kill shelter, and it's a Bichon.
A Bichon? All right. How old?
He just turned 8. I got him at 2,
How long have you had it?
6 years.
6 years? All right. And is the barking principally inside?
Marking trees and leaves where other dogs have been.
He's,
Marking.
oh, marking inside the house?
No. Just on our walks, every few steps, he has to mark where some other dog was.
Oh. Well, he's not a marker. He's a dog that doesn't heal. If he healed, he wouldn't be marking from pillar to post. He'd be walking next to you. I mean, how would you think about what approach would you take to get him to stop the marking?
And get him a great pair of leggings.
Pardon?
I was joking. I let him mark, because I think it's a natural thing for him to want to do, but you're right, it
So you don't mind?
depends on the day.
Oh, well, I mean, hell, if you don't mind, I don't mind. Okay? See, problem behavior is, first of all, relative. What's a problem to one owner is not a problem with another owner. So I would say, yeah, if you basically don't really care that he that's rude. That he marks every 50 feet. I mean, if you don't care, I don't care either.
I only care for 90 days.
But if you want to get serious about it, can we solve it? Sure. Yeah, just get him to heal.
That leash that you're using, is that what is a good thing to heal instead of like a pinch collar or
I don't use prong collars.
prong? What does that look like?
The pinch collar was a different animal altogether. The pinch collar was probably used mostly by upland field dog trainers, that worked on getting the dog, when as soon as he scented the bird and he wanted to go in and get it, the trainer taught him the task or command, whoa. That means stop immediately. All right? And one of the ways they did it was there was a collar that was called a pinch collar. It basically was a couple of pieces of leather, and in between the leather was they put tacks in there, brads. And so the head of the brad was between the two pieces of collar so it wouldn't come out. But it literally was a brad. And that's a small nail.
Yeah, I meant the prong.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, what they do when they got a new one is they take a bastard file and they just rough file over the point just to blunt it a little bit. But when you put pressure on it, it was painful, really painful. The prong is a generation away from that. Can the prong cause problems? Oh, yeah. I mean, is it possible to puncture the neck with a prong collar? Sure. The reason I don't like them is because it goes hand in hand with the ego. We start off with a flat collar, and then maybe they go to a slip, but they don't use it properly, and so the dog continues to pull, and so then they say, oh, well, the trainer says, put him on a prong collar. Right? Now, it might work, but it can take a fair amount of pressure on the dog to do it, you know? I just don't like them.
So the slip collar is enough if you do a card.
Very quick.
Yeah.
Very quick.
Yeah.
Rescue, we got him when he was about 2 months old, so I don't know how he was trained ahead of time, but he's like Husky Doberman mix. Smart, does a lot of what you talked about well. But the problem is, we go up to the place here in Wellesley Centennial Park. He runs with all of his buddies, which is great because he's 65 pounds and he needs to get out, get energy and everything else. The problem is, he eats stuff. Bowls, sometimes poop, I think, other stuff. And, so the intestinal issues are like, you gotta be kidding me, right? And if I say to him, drop it, he takes off and runs the other way. So, and I'm not gonna chase, if I chase him, he just runs further. So I don't know how to get him to, I don't want him to eat it. I know it's not good for him, but whether before we got him, he did that. His mom was killed.
How old is he?
He's 11 months now. And we got him at about 3 months. His mom was killed, run over by a car, apparently. He was separated from litter mates, so he didn't get the whole social.
Does he do it if he's on a lead and you're walking him?
No.
All right,
So I got this dilemma. He needs to exercise or he's a nightmare.
all right. Do you know when he's actually getting into the stuff?
Yeah, I can see him, and I'll be like, drop it. And sometimes he'll look at me, and I'm like, drop it. And he's like, no. Dead bird, live bowl. And every now and then he will drop it. I'll say to him, drop it. Actually, I think sometimes I'll say, leave it or sit or whatever, He will sometimes drop it. But
The chances are that you can't solve the problem.
Yeah.
All right? I can't solve the problem. But the problem's solvable. Your dog has to decide to stop it. It has to be the dog's choice. So how do you do it? Tap him with the remote collar when he does it. And don't say anything. Just tap him. It should never hurt the dog. It should be uncomfortable. Period.
That's one of the, you got the collar on, I hit the button kind of collar, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah. My friend doing that.
yeah, it looks like that. It's God's gift to dogdom when it's used properly. When it's used improperly, a person should never have the transmitter. It's like any other tool or instrument. Used the right way, it's wonderful. But can it solve it? Yeah, but you have to know when the dog is actually doing it. All right? That's critical. If he's making false ones, maybe just sniffing. No, but if you're sure he's doing it, boom, just tap. And how do you start? Start at level 1. And I use Garmin. Why? Because Garmin has a click on the intensity levels. So I'm at 4 now. Now I'm at 5. Now I'm at 6. I never have to take my eyes off the dog. You're helping the dog because he's got intestinal problems when he does it. All right? So you're helping the dog. But when you get directly involved in it with them, you're not helping them. And you're sure as hell not helping yourself. Don't get a cheap system. If you're going to get a collar, I would get a Garmin Sport Pro, period. Period. Because it's top quality. Well, most of this stuff now is made in China. And a lot of it is really bad. Very poor. So, all right, listen, I've talked long enough. I'd love to have you, if you would, go home with a book. And I want to thank each and every one of you for coming tonight, all right? I thoroughly enjoyed it.